Hello, welcome to Legally Speaking. I'm your host, Sophia Haynes. Legally Speaking is a public service of you and the law, a nonprofit whose mission is to provide information and resources to empower you in your legal affairs. Although we provide legal information, it's no way intended to be legal advice. So if you have a legal issue, make sure you have the services of a licensed professional attorney. December is Legal Resources Month on Legally Speaking, and what we're going to do is bring you organizations and other avenues where you can resolve your legal issue by not going to court necessarily, or having some assistance if you do need to go. And today we're highlighting the Georgia Legal Services Program, and we have one of the attorneys there, Miss Ayanna Jones Lightsey. Did I say that correctly?
Yes, you did.
Okay, here to tell us a lot about the Georgia Legal Services Program, so you can know about the services that they provide and how you can get involved with helping them with their mission, because they have a great one. Ayanna graduated cum laude from Clark Atlanta University with a bachelor's degree in history. She worked for several years as an assistant director for Summer Bridge Atlanta, now known as Breakthrough, a program that introduced high school and college students to the profession of teaching by having them tutor and teach middle school students in the Atlanta public school system. She decided to pursue law as an avenue to systemically impact low-income families in Georgia. She graduated law school from Emory in 2006. Since her graduation, she has been privileged to work for the Georgia Legal Services Program, servicing the counties around the Atlanta metro area. Jones Lightsey has advocated for clients in a variety of cases, including domestic violence, public benefits, federal subsidized housing, as well as elder law and consumer advocacy. Welcome, Ayanna, to our show.
Thank you very much.
We thank you so much for taking the time to be here and let us know a lot more about Georgia Legal Services Program. I've been practicing a while, so I have some information about it, and I think everything you're doing there is absolutely wonderful. And I think there is a time where we all should get involved and help you do what you do. So can you tell our audience, what is exactly the Georgia Legal Services Program?
Well, Georgia Legal Services Program is the program that's designed in Georgia to assist low-income Georgians in civil matters. We do not handle any criminal matters, but we run the range of civil matters, including family law, consumer law, senior law. If you call and meet our qualifications, we will do our best to assist you in some way, shape, or form.
So that sounds like stuff a little bit of everybody may get into.
Absolutely. We get calls about things from property, landlord, help, my DirecTV has gotten cut off and I'm a senior, what can I do? How do I get out of this contract? A range of issues.
Okay, so what is the mission of the organization itself?
Is to help provide access and opportunities to get out of poverty for low-income Georgians. And we see that avenue as helping them to fight the problems that they encounter daily, such as education. As we all know, education is an avenue out of poverty. But if the children are being streamlined from out of the education system right into jail, that can be a problem. So representation at those discipline hearings is critical, because that's a crucial point in their development where they could go one way or another. The avenue towards education or deeper into poverty. So it's very important that we try to intervene at these critical stages. Things like public benefits. Sometimes being able to receive food stamps is the difference between good nutrition and poor nutrition. And we all know that's very important for children and seniors as well. Yes. So we try to advise them about these mechanisms and ways to get out of poverty and to intervene at times when they cannot advocate for themselves.
Yeah, I want to definitely get into a lot of the services you provide, because I don't think people know that a lot of things that they need, you actually have resources to help them do that. But just tell me, by way of background, how did Georgia Legal Services Program get started?
Well, the State Bar of Georgia has several programs, and one of their programs is the Young Lawyers Division. It's lawyers under the age of 35. Well, they conducted a study in the late 60s showing that there was a disparity between the legal services that the low-income Georgians needed and the actual services that they had access to. So out of that study came Georgia Legal Services, the funding for that program, the advocacy for that program. So since 1971, Georgia Legal Services has had offices all across the state of Georgia servicing low-income Georgians.
Oh, wow. That's excellent. So tell us, how do you determine the types of cases that you're going to take? Is it the same thing from year to year, or is it some type of process you go through to determine what type of case you're going to take that year? How do you determine the types of cases that you'll take?
Well, because there are several different offices in the Georgia area, each one has priorities based on the area that they're in. For instance, if they're in a military area, some of their priorities will be geared more towards assisting military families. Such as my office, the Piedmont office, we surround the metro Atlanta area, but it's the rural counties such as Polk, Harrelson. We go as far as Walton, Greene. So some of our needs are geared towards the residents in that area. Things like USDA rural housing. Sometimes there are questions about that type of housing, or food stamps for the elderly, or just outreach to the Hispanic population. We've noticed the Hispanic population in Georgia is growing. So the process for each office is a little bit different in terms of accessing what our priorities will be. Overall, we have an income limit that we have to meet. It's usually 200% of the poverty level or less. That's one of the first thresholds.
So what roughly is that as far as income wise?
Well, for a 4-person family, mom, dad, 2 kids, that could be about $36,000 or less. Sometimes people don't think they'll qualify, but I always say call. We have a computer system. We're not mathematicians. Yeah. We plug in the numbers.
We did before computers.
We had the calculating machine that spit out the paper. So we try to raise the cap as high as we can. And some populations that cap doesn't necessarily apply to, such as senior citizens. They're on a fixed income, so they have some issues that are a little bit different, but we do try to reach them as well, because especially with the movement and growth of technology, it can be very hard for them to get the resources that they need. If you tell them that they can apply for food stamps online, they may nod and smile and say, yes, I'm going to do that. But the truth is they may be daunted by technology, and so they don't have access to that. So we try to assist them in that way. Or even getting to the Department of Family and Children's Services office can be very difficult for people because it's so far. They don't know where it is. They don't have transportation. And sometimes you can't get through on the telephone. So you need to go and sit in the office. And that may be something that we will do to assist our clients that cannot do that.
Okay, so let's talk about, I want to go into a real thorough detail about the services exactly that you provide, because I want them to leave from this show to know kind of a nice little laundry list of those services and what you do, because we know you do all civil, so criminal, they need to find another avenue.
Correct.
But there are a plethora of civil services, so let's talk about some of those services that you provide. If you can kind of just give us the area and what you do in that particular area.
Okay. Unemployment insurance. If you are fired or you quit for a good work-related reason, you are entitled to benefits if you are not at fault. So what typically happens is someone is fired or they quit, they go into the Department of Labor, they'll file a request for benefits. The claims examiner will make a determination after interviewing the client and their employer. If they're granted benefits, they don't need us. But if they're not granted benefits, they have the right of appeal in front of a hearings officer. Our office can go with you to that appeal to fight for your unemployment benefits. Domestic violence is a huge area for us. We try to assist survivors of domestic violence with just about anything, beginning with the restraining order process against their abuser, all the way down through how do I get child support. We'll send them to the correct offices to request that. To unemployment. Sometimes if you are battered, you can't always appear to work on time, or your batterer could come to your job and harass you, and your boss doesn't want that, so we can assist them with unemployment appeals on that avenue. Restraining orders. There are some services out there. For instance, if you are a survivor of domestic violence and you apply for food stamps, Department of Family and Children's Services needs to prioritize your application and not necessarily make you wait as long as you might have to, because maybe that's the difference between you staying with the abuser and leaving if you know that you have money for food.
Oh, so that is a process that's normally in place.
Yes.
And the food stamp office knows about that.
They're supposed to.
Oh, but you can help them, remind them if they don't.
Sometimes that's our job, to remind them of federal regulations and makes the process go smoother.
I did not know that. That's great information. Okay, what else are y'all doing over there?
Public benefits, things like TANF, which has been severely reduced in the state of Georgia. That's temporary assistance to needy families. That's for extremely low income families. It seems like there's been a mandate to get as many people off of TANF as possible, but there are still people that can qualify for it. So they can contact our office. We'll review their case and decide if we think they have a good case and help them with their appeal. Medicaid for children, pregnant women, low-income families, seniors. There's a myriad of categories of Medicaid, and sometimes you don't know which class of assistance you apply for, or you've been turned down. And again, our office can help you and represent you at the appeal, give you some advice. We also do some consumer advocacy. One of the things that we've noticed in the state of Georgia is title pawns, payday loans. They kind of prey on people who are right on that gray area of being really, really poor to check. And some of those businesses aren't following the proper procedures in terms of informing you of your rights, how much they can charge, interest, and things like that. So we'll look at those kinds of cases. Private landlord tenant, if you are being evicted, there are rights that you have as a tenant. Not a whole lot, but there are rights that you have as a tenant. We can advise you about those rights. Federally subsidized housing, public housing, Section 8 vouchers, USDA, rural housing vouchers, rehabilitate. There's a wide range of subsidized housing. You have rights, and if you're being evicted, or if you feel like those rights are being violated, especially as a disabled person, there's federal law, the ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, that require them to make reasonable accommodations. So if you have severe asthma or lung issues, and they place you in a unit next to a smoker, and you've requested to be moved and they don't move you, you can call our office and we'll try to negotiate with the landlord to assist you in that, because you are a person with a disability and you need a reasonable accommodation. That smoke could be affecting your condition. Nursing home discharges. Sadly, when we have to put our relatives into nursing homes, sometimes there are instances when they're filing for a discharge to get that person out of that home. Again, you have rights as a resident of a nursing home. We do go to those nursing home discharge hearings to assist you in fighting to stay, if that's what you want.
To do.
We've also been looking at mortgage modifications. That's the newest area that my office specifically is looking at. It's so confusing. It's confusing to us, so we know that to the layperson, getting 40 pages of legalese is very daunting. But there are rights, and there are things that the creditors and the banks are supposed to be doing that they may or may not be doing. So we'll look at those cases. Foreclosures. We don't assist a whole lot in the process, but we can give you some general information so you know what to expect. For instance, if my home is foreclosed on, how long do I have to stay? Can I stay afterwards? If I'm a tenant in the home that was foreclosed, you have rights.
And that is huge now. We're seeing a whole lot of that.
Absolutely.
So I was glad to know y'all could plug in. When you plug in so many different areas, I did not know that.
It's amazing to us too as well when you kind of list it out.
Wow, that is absolutely awesome. And it actually touches a little bit of I can think of several people in all of those categories that could help, and I didn't even know that all of those particular services were available to them. So that is excellent. Well, we're going to take a break here. And when we come back, we're going to talk about some of the special projects that you have. And since you're doing such great work, how can the public get plugged into this thing? We'll be back in just a few moments. You are tuned into Legally Speaking, a public service of You and the Law. You and the Law is a nonprofit whose mission is to provide legal information and legal resources to empower you in your legal affairs. If you would like to have a question answered or a topic featured on Legally Speaking, feel free to contact us online at www.youandthelawtoday.org. You can also sign up there on our website for our mailing list, as well as follow us on Facebook and Twitter. Remember, with every right comes responsibilities, so know your rights and accept your responsibility. Welcome back. We're talking to Ayana Jones-Lightsey, is an attorney with the Georgia Legal Services Program, and she's given us some great information about the services that Georgia Legal Services Program provides for low-income Georgians who need a little help in making sure that their rights are protected. Now, before we left, we talked about, who you are and how you got started and some of the services that you provided. So now I want to talk about some of the special projects that Georgia Legal Services Program kind of spearheads or they run. So could you tell our audience about some of those projects? I know there is a statewide domestic violence project. Can you tell us what that project is about?
Yes, the statewide domestic violence project, we get involved in domestic violence task forces that each county has. Those task forces are made up of shelter workers, court personnel staff, judges, sheriffs, anyone who wants to get involved in the process of protecting survivors of domestic violence. That includes us getting on those boards, pushing for more communication. For instance, if you have a restraining order in New York and you move to Georgia, is that enforceable? Are the judges aware of how to enforce that? Is there a special process that the shelters need to go through to make sure that the sheriffs are aware of this New York order? Those types of things are what we want to get involved in, as well as the higher level talks about what needs to be done to protect domestic violence survivors even better and the children of domestic violence. So that's one of our projects. We also have action teams in which all of our 12 offices coordinate and participate on a monthly or a quarterly basis, such as the elder action team. What we'll do is get together and talk about issues that we're seeing in our elderly population. For instance, one of the things elderly citizens need in a nursing home is a Miller Trust. They need to take a certain amount of their money and put it in a pile, and the state will then have access. That allows them to qualify for Medicaid. Well, one of the issues we're seeing are that banks are no longer allowing those Miller Trust accounts to be open because one of the requirements is you can't have a fee on that account. Well, what bank doesn't charge a fee on the accounts anymore? So now you're in Meriwether trying to figure out, there are 2 banks here, and neither one of those banks will allow these types of accounts. How do we help those citizens? We also are starting up our education action team. How do we help students with disabilities? How can we move forward? Housing action teams. What issues are we noticing in public housing? For instance, are public housing residents getting their utility credit? Is the rent being calculated properly, or are they being required to pay more because there isn't an awareness about that?
Yeah, so how would they know?
Notices that may get put in their box or may not. Or again, you're asking someone who may work 2 jobs, has a child, is trying to do the best they can to read this jargon, this legalese jargon. The federal law now mandates, etc. They're not going to necessarily have the time or the wherewithal to comprehend what's going on. And
they may be a little intimidated by that too.
Definitely.
And just think, if I don't bother it, it doesn't bother me.
Right. If I don't read it and I didn't see it, and I can go on about my daily.
Okay, so what other special projects do you have? You were talking about some of your action teams.
We also have a consumer advocacy team that's really ramping up. We actually have had several cases where we've taken on creditors because the language in the contract is not correct, or we feel like they've taken wrongful actions, maybe defaulting on the loan too prematurely or not giving our clients the right to redeem. A lot of people don't know that there are some rights to redeem even after things like a foreclosure. Well,
talk a little bit about that. That would be some good information to let them have. I know you can't give it all.
Right. Once a home is foreclosed on, there may be some rights that if you can get the money up, the principal up, to redeem the home and stay in the home. Of course, that's not most people, but the fact that you weren't even informed about that right means that you couldn't even try. And then, of course, there's been several lawsuits against banks like Countrywide, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, for their predatory practices and even giving out these mortgages to people who couldn't possibly have afforded them. Things like what's being reported on your credit. A lot of people don't know that after 7 years of an inactive reporting on your credit, you have the right to have that wiped out and not brought back up. Or for creditors coming after you for something that's not on your credit report, there are some rights that you have regarding that. A third-party debt collector has certain obligations, times of the day when they can call you. They're not supposed to be harassing you. They're not supposed to be threatening to send you to jail. I mean, those things are completely unacceptable, and the federal law has fines for them if they are engaging in those practices. So we try to look out for those kinds of things.
Great. So tell me about, do you have anything for the homeless?
Actually, several of our offices, not the one I'm specifically in, do address needs of the homeless. For instance, food stamps. it comes on a card that you can then use. One of the problems that we were noticing is that because homeless people don't have addresses, sometimes the caseworker was not processing their case. They just were not. But there are ways to get around them not having an address. They can use a shelter as an address, and the initial request for information can go there. They can pick up their cards there. There are ways to get around that. And so even though this person may be homeless, they shouldn't be hungry as well if they qualify for food stamps. Or if they're veterans, they have certain rights that need to be honored.
And we see that a lot. A lot of veteran programs are starting to spark up a little bit. Are y'all doing anything in that area?
We actually have a military pro bono program that we have at the state bar that we're kind of linked into, where there are lawyers that are willing to work for free pro bono to assist the military families, military vets with some of the issues that they're facing. Again, like food stamps or access to mental health, those kinds of issues that we try to look at assisting them with.
And when we're talking about the bar, you're doing a whole lot. Do you have a way where other attorneys can volunteer to help?
Absolutely.
So tell everybody in there about how we can, all the attorneys out there, how they can help you with this.
We have a pro bono program which is run by different coordinators in our offices. You contact those pro bono coordinators in any one of our offices, and you can take on one case a year pro bono in the area of your specialty. If it's consumer, if it's bankruptcy, if it's family violence, if it's divorce. One of the things we do specifically in our office is we'll have people call wanting a divorce. There are no children, there's no debt, there's no property, and we'll kind of farm out those cases, requesting that lawyers take on those cases, and they can then get credit for those, the CLE credits that they need for the year to keep their professional license up. So we try to do as much outreach as possible to the different bars in our counties, but you can definitely call the central office, or you can call an office in the area that you're located in and ask how you can get involved.
Give them the number for the central office.
It's 404-206-5175. That's our central administrative office, which is actually located in downtown Atlanta. Call them and they will farm you out to wherever you need to go.
That's right. One case a year, I think we all could handle that. And they're doing some great work, and there's a lot more work that needs to be done. So that's what I call the whole reasonable service that we have. Well, how can the public help you out? Is there a way the public can, I'm not a lawyer, but you're doing such great work. Is there a way that I can plug in and help out?
One of the things that we definitely advocate for is people being able to advocate for themselves. So, for instance, tenants in public housing have a right to have a tenant housing agency, administration, where they can come together and present their ideas to the management. So that would be something we would definitely be willing to assist with, setting up that tenant association. There are a myriad of fundraisers around town, like the domestic violence shelters that do those kinds of things. So outreach to those agencies that need assistance also indirectly helps us.
Okay, great. And this show is all about resources. So I want to talk specifically about one resource that I noticed you have. It's a website, and we're all in the technological age. If you don't have a computer, you can go to a library and get one. So let's talk about legalaidgeorgia.org. Could you tell our audience a little bit about that?
That's actually our program where we try to have forms and information so that pro se litigants, that means people who are going into court without a lawyer, which is absolutely possible. People don't always believe that.
It happens all the time.
But you can go into court and advocate for yourself. So we have different things like forms on that website and information about how to use those forms. We try to phrase it in the form of a question. So how do I obtain guardianship over my sister's child that's been living with me for 10 years? How
so
do I
something
get them
I
to
type
school?
in, or is there like a search, or how does that work?
You can actually Google Legal Aid Georgia. There's some dashes in that, but you can Google Legal Aid Georgia and get onto the website, and then it's grouped by subject. What area are you looking for assistance in? Family law, custody, consumer, education. Click on those buttons, and it will take you from there through a series of facts or frequently asked questions and then forms that you can look at. to assist yourself.
And that website is legalaid-ga.org, and we'll provide that as a link on our website, youinthelaw.today.org, so that you can get that information kind of quickly. So what else can I do on that website? Is this a matter of its information, or does it refer me to organizations? I mean, what type of information will I get on there?
It's primarily an information website, and it does provide you with some of the Georgia legal statutes, which I think everyone should be able to know where to go to find the law. You don't necessarily want to just rely on what someone is telling you. And most superior courthouses have copies of Georgia law. You just need to know how to find the section and get in there and title for what you're looking for. So at least you can have somewhat of an understanding of what you need to do. They also mention on those websites the different Georgia legal services offices around the state, and you can type in Richmond County. How do I find the legal service office that services Richmond County? You can also find that on that website.
Okay. What about attorney referrals? I guess, let me ask you this, how large is your staff that handles all of this, and you have to actually send stuff out either because you don't have the manpower, or it's an expertise or a service that you don't provide? Is there any type of attorney referral type service?
Yes, we have several referral services. We have the pro bono that I mentioned earlier, where if you call into our office and it's an area that we aren't necessarily prioritizing that year, but we know there are attorneys in your area that are willing to assist you pro bono. We also do private attorney referrals. You can get on a list, and we inform the clients that these are private attorneys. You will need to negotiate a fee with them, but inform them that Georgia Legal Services has sent you, and they may be able to work with you on a sliding scale or an advisory basis. We refer out a lot of wills, probate, estate, because those are generally simple matters that we don't necessarily need to handle, but there are a lot of attorneys that will be willing to take on that kind of case.
Oh, awesome. So where are the offices for Georgia Legal Services is located?
There are 12 offices around the state. There's an office in Gainesville. Then there's an office. There are actually 2 offices in downtown Atlanta. There's a central office, but there's also the Piedmont office, which is the area that I service. We service the surrounding metro Atlanta counties, not metro Atlanta like Fulton or Cobb, but the ones that are further out: Douglas, Bartow, Gordon, Greene. There's also offices in Savannah, Brunswick, Waycross, trying to go through the list in my mind, Albany, Macon, Columbus. So we try to position ourselves all around the state so that there aren't any counties that are left out. And in general, we have a mileage budget, so we can drive further out if we need to service people.
Okay, but so those 12 offices service everybody in Georgia. Doesn't matter, you find that office.
Theoretically, yes.
Okay.
We do our best.
Okay, so how can we find Georgia Legal Services online? Do you have a website?
You can Google Georgia Legal Services, and it will automatically come up. It will direct you to our specific website that then talks about our office, our locations. It also has inspiring stories on there about people we've been able to help, and the difference that our services have made in their lives.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And of course, we're out of time. And it was great information, because I honestly was not aware that you provided so many civil services. So there's a lot of education out there that people can get. There are a lot of services that you can get. So ladies and gentlemen, there's really no excuse for anybody not having some of the simple basic needs. We talked about TANF, we talked about food stamps, we talked about homeless assistance, veterans. So there are organizations out there that are standing ready and willing to help you if you need those particular services that are involved. And I'm pretty sure if they can't help you, they can refer you to somebody who can. So we want to thank you, Ayana.
Thank you
for coming on the show. And I believe that the public will get involved with your mission as well, whether it's the attorneys that are coming to help with the load, or maybe we can make a donation to you for all the services that you are providing. As you know, Legally Speaking occurs every Sunday at 6, and you can find our show online at www.youinthelawtoday.org. We load up a new show every Sunday that will be available for that entire week. And remember, until next time, with every right comes responsibilities. So know your rights and accept your responsibilities. We'll see you next week.